like we are live on LinkedIn. Does anybody see us live on LinkedIn? All right. Hold on one second, Rich. I'm just trying to verify that we are live on LinkedIn before we get started here. We're supposed to be feeding live on LinkedIn.
You are live.
I am live on LinkedIn. You see me? I don't see me. All right, but if you say we're live on LinkedIn, then we're good to go, Tina. All right. So Tina, if you can monitor LinkedIn for us and just put the questions into the Q&A for us, say hello to everybody on LinkedIn, that'd be great. So anyway, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are in the world, and welcome Rich Ham from Fine Tuners. Thank you, Rich, very much for joining us today. I'm really excited about being here with you. And oh, one more thing, we're already recording, correct? Okay, great. Just want to make sure we're recording because sometimes I don't hit the recording button until about 20 minutes in, and that gets really awkward. So, Rich,
excited to be here. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Rich in Fine Tune. You guys are a permanent residence partner of Procurement Foundry. Thank you very much for your sponsorship of Procurement Foundry. I know our members are getting a lot of value out of the relationship with you already. We've been working together for well over a year now. I think what you all do is simply amazing. I love your business model. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think that that what you do and what you focus on and the team that you've brought together is quite honestly the subject matter experts in what you do. I haven't found anybody else who does what you do as well as you do. So this is in the Mike Cadieux no-brainer list of all time. And tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about the company, what you focus on, and what you all do. That'd be great.
Yeah. So we are. While we're here and thrilled to be a part of Procurement Foundry, it's been. I'm glad to hear that it's been good for you and your community. It's mutual. It's been good for us too. I think of Fine Tune not necessarily as a procurement solution, but as really more of an expense management solution that makes procurement look good. And the reason I draw the distinction is we address some of the vulnerabilities and shortcomings that procurement inevitably faces by virtue of just the gradual leaning out of procurement departments that we've seen since the Great Depression. Excuse me, the Great Recession. That doesn't go back that far. Since the Great Recession, last 12 years or so, as buyers have been, Bob the buyer, Pat the purchaser retires, and they're not necessarily replaced. The rest of the team splits up their work, and slowly but surely, we arrive in 2021 having been through 2 recessionary periods, and procurement folks are being asked to do the work of 2 or 3 people on a per capita basis, and so that has inevitably created some vulnerabilities, and there are certain expenses where those vulnerabilities have been feasted on most aggressively by the suppliers in those industries. Within the indirect services arena, we specialize in a handful of these expenses. We call them nuisance expenses.
Right.
They're the kinds of expenses that take up more of a buyer's time than they're worth. If you look at the relationship between monetary priority and management time, it's all out of whack. It's an unhealthy relationship. And then you also have the fact that these are the kinds of expenses by virtue of their complexity, by virtue of the multi-year service contract nature of them, with discretionary charges, various supplier practices designed to extract profitability after deals get done. We see that these are the kinds of expenses where lean procurement falls flat most often, and the efforts of procurement don't end up hitting the P&L. This is why I call us an expense management solution and not just a procurement solution, because in these categories, it's not good enough to put good contracts in place. You have to manage the category with a certain level of dedication and vigilance. And so there's a phenomenon that I know you're eager to talk about. We kind of chatted about it as we were prepping for today, this phenomenon that we keep seeing in our space that we call good contract, bad deal. It's like procurement's done a good job. They've put a good deal in place, and yet a good contract in place. That contract is now sitting in a file folder on somebody's machine, and out there in the field, the checks that are getting cut to these indirect suppliers in our areas of expertise, are way bigger than they should be. Now, to be clear, just so your listeners who aren't familiar with fine-tune know, the specific categories that I'm speaking about, the nuisance expenses that we're deeply, deeply immersed in, we're like 6 inches wide and a mile deep. And so the categories are the uniform and industrial laundering industry, the uniform rental industry, the waste and recycling industry, the security and guard services industry, the pest control industry, and we're in the process of a launch into sanitation services as well, which has a lot of common threads with security and even pest control. You'd be surprised. It's one of those expenses that combines kind of labor and stuff, people and stuff. And there's just layer upon layer of complexity and so many buttons that suppliers can push to extract profitability even after good contracts get signed. These are the expenses that I think buyers should be most eager to take off their plate, hand off to a third-party expert like us. And it helps that we're staffed by world-class folks from the very top of these industries. We've got, the very best and brightest from insiders from those industries on our team.
Yeah, listen, I've had a lot of problems in the past where I've had great deals, good contracts and bad deals, right? I'm not unaware of that. I mean, unfortunately for me, one of the places where I've seen this, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, was associated with technology hardware and not necessarily associated with tailspend categories, like where you're just simply an expert in this space, right? I mean, I've negotiated deals in the past where we've had, great discounting schemers associated with deals, or potentially even some areas where we'd have escalated discounting or, aggregated spend opportunities if we had more buy-in to the contracts across our community and across our company, just not to be able to take advantage of them because it gets lost somewhere in the shuffle associated with, there's just so many moving parts associated with some of these larger contracts.
Yeah.
You negotiate a 30% discount and all of a sudden you look back on your invoices from last year and you're only getting a 23% discount because somebody fat fingered in the discount amount inside of, your vendor's system. And I'm sure it was an error, but at the same time, it's an error that benefits them, right? Or other areas like that.
Some of these things you're saying were true even before procurement got leaned out, because let's face it, if you sign a 3 to 5 year indirect services contract for uniforms or waste or whatever, going in, the landscape is not going to remain just perfectly static throughout the duration of that agreement. There are going to be changes. You do your best to contemplate the changes, but you can't always see all of them coming. And inevitably, when your spend starts to shift further and further away from the originally contemplated contract, it makes sense that it becomes a little bit less competitive over time. The other thing that has happened simultaneously, like that was already a reality. Then what has happened is indirect suppliers have figured out, hey, my customers are not staffed to really manage me. They don't have the resources to manage me. I can give away whatever I need to give away at contract phase because I've got tools to get it all back. They're going to leave me to manage the expense. The fox will be guarding the hen house, and I will make up everything I give back in contract negotiations and then some in very short order. And so that's the phenomenon we've been watching. And it just getting back to the good contract, bad deal phenomenon. What does a contract really do? I mean, it sets the rules in theory for whatever was happening as of the day the contract was signed. But it does what it literally does is sit on a computer. It sits in somebody's file drawer. That's what the contract does. Right. Invoices come in, services are rendered, discretionary charges are imposed. All that stuff is happening. And is it or is it not in compliance with the contract? Are there gray areas where if it was managed more tightly, you could tighten them up, but they're not being managed closely, and so they run amok over time. We see, time and time again, there's a visual depiction we've developed called the nuisance expense roller coaster, where it just shows the typical 3 to 5 year arc of, throughout the entire history of our clients' accounts. It's like every 3 to 5 years, Pat, the purchaser, negotiated a new deal, drove it down, it went back up for 3 years, did it again. It's the definition of insanity after a while. You're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
I'm writing down Pat the purchaser because I'm going to use that. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to steal that from you. It's going to be a figurative person inside of one of my blog posts in the next couple of weeks or months. I'm going to try and sneak that in and see if both the community and yourself can pick up on it. So thank you.
Very good. Yes. Happy to share it.
So just a little bit of housekeeping. We've already got questions coming in from inside of the Zoom room with our members here. Plus, we've got one of the largest audience I think I've seen in a long time up on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for that. Obviously, people are really concerned about the fact that, these are real expenses that they just can't get their teams because, like you said, they've been thinned out. And it's still, when you add it all up, it's still a lot of money. So hello to everybody. I'm watching the LinkedIn. And just so that you know, if you do have questions on LinkedIn and you're hearing me say this right now, please put your questions into LinkedIn. My team will funnel them back into our conversation as well, Rich, and I'll get you the LinkedIn questions as well as they come up. So feel free. We are monitoring both areas. I already have a couple of questions inside of the room, so let's talk about those really quickly. I do want to get into areas where you're starting to see trends and changes, because I'm sure that COVID has created some changes inside of these things. Plus, I know your business model is expanding as well. You're starting to add new pieces of business into your mix. I'm really interested to talk about that, but let's grab a couple real quick questions for you because they just seem to be on top. Doesn't an S2P put the purchases against the contract to provide transparency into contract spend?
I mean, theoretically, yes, but the fact is that indirect suppliers, when you run a 3-card Monty,
Right.
It might be a little easier to audit. There's a number or 2 numbers or 3 numbers that have to be audited to assure compliance. And it's easier to normalize for changes over the course of a 3 to 5 year agreement. When you have an expense that's a 3,000 card Monty, and where any one supplier's way of doing things just a little different has its own ripple effect with a dozen other implications in that deal, the answer very quickly becomes no, especially as you start getting into a changing landscape and evolving expense that bears less and less resemblance to the originally negotiated contract over time. That's why just a certain level of dedication and vigilance is required in managing some of the most complex categories. May be true in certain other categories that I don't specialize in. In our spaces, the answer is absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier, right? I mean, you write a contract and you give away everything you need to give away at contract time in order to execute the contract. And then, if you're not watching the hen house, then things are going to happen, right? Whether they're meant to happen or just by mistake, things happen. And I've seen people, lose millions of dollars in time and energy that they took to negotiate these deals. Only to come unraveled in the fact that you're not managing it, you're not keeping an eye on it, because and like you said, the procurement groups around the world have been thinned out so much that you really need somebody to help you kind of monitor these things, right? So what kind of data do you need to get off the ground? Somebody's already asking us about a proof of concept, right, with you. So what type of information do you need to be able to create a proof of concept for a potential client for your organization? The actual question is, what kind of data do you need to get off the ground with a proof of concept? So let's assume for a second, I mean, we've been on this thing for exactly 8 minutes, and it sounds like we've already got some new biz generation going on. So I'm really excited about that for you. But let's talk a little bit, and I was going to get to this at the end about how people engage you and what they need in order to try and get some support from your organization. But since it's here, let's talk about it really quickly.
Sure.
What do people need to do to engage you? What do you need for a proof of concept?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we're purely a contingency-based compensation model, typically on first cycles. We're seeing an increasing number of our clients that are becoming longtime clients convert to, a fixed management fee for us to continue managing the category. That's a pretty easy call. Once you've been through an initial cycle with us, you understand just how different life is, with us managing this category, running interference against all the distractions that these categories tend to cause, keeping you focused on more mission critical priorities while driving savings initiatives. So, but it's still 80%-ish of our revenue is derived via contingency-based shared savings agreements. And so obviously it's a low risk proposition. For larger accounts, we do sometimes do what we call a shallow dive, which is just, a surface level discovery process, just to make sure we're not wasting each other's time, that it's going to bear fruit. The good thing about our categories is we don't deal in percentages like 8 to 12. We tend to deal in percentages more like 20 to 50. That's how we're viable. We target smaller categories than most consulting enterprises, and our first cousins in the in the expense management consulting arena tend to target larger categories, energy, logistics, et cetera. Here we are targeting smaller categories, but we really make a quantum impact on them. So we're generally not worried sight unseen that we're not going to be able to save somebody significant dollars. And part of it is because of that phenomenon we talked about on the front end. Even if there's a good contract in place, it's still probably a bad deal. Maybe we'll only save that customer 20% because they have a good contract. The one with a bad contract, it'll be 40. And so, that's for starters. Now, when it comes to taking on new clients and how data gets collected from us, there's good news there. I mean, we get a letter of agency signed with our clients on their letterhead that goes to their suppliers that were for the categories we're going to be managing, and all the data gets collected directly from the suppliers involved there. We've got well-established systems for getting data in the format that we demand from our targeted industry suppliers. So we don't. A fine-tuned project is not an our client's project. It's a project that enables them to work on other projects. And so my clients aren't working on uniforms or security or waste or pest control. They're working on other stuff while we're working on our areas.
Wow. So I want to make sure I understand that correctly, because you threw something out there. So you're telling me that first swing, first time you're engaging with a client, you're seeing discounting opportunities in your space with your expertise of anywhere between 20 and 40%.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Wow.
Some of the largest accounts we've taken on in the last couple of years, I can think of one where, the annual spend went from about, north of 16 million to under 10 per year. That's for an account that size, that was a significant accomplishment. It was a big deal, make no mistake, but it wasn't like it was shocking. Stuff like that happens pretty regularly. We're working on another similar process right now that's likely to bear pretty similar returns. Sometimes we take on categories that are only $1 million or $2 million, but it's very common for, I would say the average in those ranges is going to be 30-35% on our first pass through. It is a little variable by industry. If you're in life sciences, pharma, food processing, those are industries where our returns tend to be a little bigger than normal. Big manufacturing, personalized or big box opportunities where there's been a lot of leveraging and strategic management at the top. Those are the ones that might gravitate a little more towards the 20 end of the spectrum. But even with all that said, there are exceptions to all those rules. It's, they're outliers.
Louis Bastone just put up a quote. He says, "Rich, managing facility services and costs, you're speaking my language. Lots of opportunities in this space." Not a question, but certainly a great comment. One of the other questions that's inside of the room is, I have a hard time justifying hiring a consultant to do what I was hired to do. Yeah, absolutely, no question about that. But on a contingency base, number one, you don't have an expertise in all of these areas, whether it's waste, whether it's I don't know. I mean, all of these, there's nobody that can cover everything, right?
I want to push back a little bit on that, just conceptually too. Were you hired to perform tasks, or were you hired to produce results?
Right.
Like if the job description is check these boxes, you do this work and nobody else, even if the results aren't going to be as good, well, then I'd say, that was a bad job description. Right. I would think the job description should be produce optimal results, implement strategies that will result in that. And maybe your company's different. If you have really robust resources and you're on a per buyer basis, per category manager basis, only managing 15, 20 million in annual spend, maybe you have the ability to get really engaged in the joust with all of your supplier base and to be there vigilantly dedicated, managing all those expenses. But I've got clients that are managing anywhere from 50 to north of 100 million per buyer. You have no prayer of engaging in expense management at that level. So if you're hired for results, then I think that mindset is kind of 20 years in the past. I think, in 2021, that mindset needs to be adapted to, I need to focus on results, not tasks.
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit. I want to talk about trends and changes, because I mean, we're in a unique time, right? Absolutely no question about it. Especially in areas around PPE, right? Around uniforms, around cleaning and sterilization. And I'm sure that there are some emerging trends and changes that are taking place right now inside of those industries with vendors. Are you seeing anything that people need to be aware of that you're seeing from an expertise perspective associated
Yeah.
with, I mean, everything from, I don't know, terms and conditions inside of contracts to costing models to, just the changing of the dynamics of the services that are being offered, right? What do you
Yeah,
see?
two things come to mind immediately, and one of them you just alluded to, and it actually it's one of the best sales pitches I can ever give for solutions like Fine Tune and our other cousins in our area of the consulting world. They're in numerous indirect service categories. We have seen just in the last year that their standard service agreements have started to include language restricting the customer's ability to retain a consultant. Now, if you back away for a moment and ask, why are these suppliers doing that? Well, it's because they want to make more money off of your account. And they think that if you augment your resources and get smarter and hire people from inside the belly of the beast, from their side of the table, you are likely to produce better results, and they would prefer that you not do that. And so, I mean, that's all pretty straightforward, I think. But we are seeing that in the uniform industry and the waste industry. We've seen clauses titled like direct relationship clause, where you commit on the front end of the contract that you're never going to seek any outside help in managing this expense, no matter what, during the course of that agreement. I mean, to me, that's the best sales pitch we could ever.
Have you actually seen that?
Oh yeah,
that's
to me,
unbelievable to me. That's unbelievable.
I find it pretty brazen, and I can't imagine that people would sign it unless they're just not paying attention, because I come from the mindset that says, if I'm spending millions of dollars a year with you, you don't get to tell me what strategies I can and can't use for managing that money, especially if I'm the one that knows what my resources are, on my side. Am I not allowed to hire another buyer? Can we not grow our team? Is that also a restriction you're going to put on me?
Yeah. Am I only allowed to spend a certain number of hours per year thinking about my spend with you? Like, what's next?
That's a great extension of it. So, I do think it's brazen and ridiculous, but hey, if people will sign it, you might as well put it in there. And I'm sure some people are, but we're trying to get the word out. Like, you have to reject this clause. You can't let your suppliers tell you what strategies you can and can't use to manage them. And by the way, think for a moment about why they're doing that. So anyway, another one though, Mike, just to answer your question that comes to mind, for the last year, we have noticed there's been kind of a steady buildup of supplier transitions on hold in our targeted industries. And I'm sure this is true across many lines of business. And, I think as the pandemic hopefully winds down to a crawl and then to, a non-issue, hopefully over the course of the next year, you're going to see a wave of supplier transitions in fields where people have been holding back just because of, fear of doing that in the middle of a pandemic. And so, I think there's going to be more shuffling of, there's going to be more musical chairs going on in a lot of industries where big customers are going to be changing hands just because they've been waiting for the right time to do it.
All right, so a couple of things, man. I got to peel back the onion on a couple of things. First things first, if there's anybody inside of our Zoom room right now, or anybody listening in the 30 plus, 35, 40 people listening on LinkedIn, if anybody who's actually seen a direct engagement clause on a contract, please tell me that you've seen it. I'm really interested. Somebody ping in on either the chat or up inside of the feed. I really want to hear about this because that is brand new to me. I've never heard of that before. I think it's completely insane. I think it's one of those things that's kind of like the lawyers put into the contract that says, by the way, if you can read this, none of anything that I've written above actually matters, right? It's one of those things that's like, okay, nobody actually read the 237-page contract associated with your outsourcing BPO, right? And I've seen attorneys do that in the past, and they're like, okay, by the way, disregard everything in the top 5 pages. I just put it in there to see if you'd actually read it, right? So I don't know. I'd be shocked if anybody's actually, I I mean, you're telling me you've seen it, so
Oh, yeah.
this is what you do for a living. But
multiple industries,
shocked.
multiple suppliers. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's spreading right now, but we
Yeah.
we tend to notice it early, obviously, because we're so deeply immersed. But buyers will be seeing it more and more.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Definitely something we need to keep on the outlook for. I'm really interested in talking about, and you talked a little bit about the changes that are taking place. Are there any real dynamic shifts in cost basis associated with any of the things you're doing, whether it's waste management, or are you seeing influence from other areas like, hey, there's a lot of pressure in the supply chain right now associated with containers and waste removal? What are you hearing? What are you seeing from a cost basis? Is it trending up? Are there certain areas that people need to be? I mean, obviously, they're starting to add more things into the contract associated with sterilization and cleaning, right? So I mean, that's another area that's really big that people need to think about, and probably don't have that level of expertise, even though they've been category facilities managers for a couple decades, maybe, right?
Yeah, I think the answer that I'll give you, Mike, and I'll throw you a couple of little anecdotal examples. So much of what we find is in that next layer, just behind the invoicing. Knowing what reporting to ask for from a supplier. Take the pest control industry, for example. When you get your hands on service tickets and you understand the relationship between time spent in a food processing facility or in a medical facility or whatever the case may be versus services performed, and how long it takes to perform those services, and you see I was on site for an hour and I performed 5 hours worth of work, that doesn't pass the smell test, and then you can peel back the onion from there. Jumping over, there's another phenomenon we've seen kind of closely related to that in any expenses where there's a labor component. We've just seen a lot of gamesmanship surrounding how that labor component gets billed, and take security services. You're talking so many layers of complexity here. You've got guard levels, you've got various pay rates, you've got overtime and other, holiday, other classifications that impact the appropriate dollar amount that is to be billed to a particular client. And then all of that varies zip code by zip code at different facilities around the country. Then you get even beyond all of that. And when you get into service tickets, you start seeing, gosh, at this facility, these guards tend to clock in and out at exactly the top of the hour, 00 minutes, 00 seconds, time after time after time. And here's a case where somebody was
extremely punctual.
Yes, and here's a case where somebody was clocked in for 3.5 weeks and never clocked out, like brought their sleeping bag and stayed for 25 days. And so, these are, everything can look good at first glance contractually and can even look good at the invoice level where you go like, okay, yeah, I think rates generally align with the terms of the agreement. And then you start peeling back to the next layer of, what would I look for if I was an industry insider who really understood how this is likely playing out, where the profitability is being buried in these accounts. That's the stuff that we're seeing. And of course, not coincidentally, it's all the stuff that takes a little more time to find, time and knowledge, but especially the time is a significant factor because they know you don't have it. They know you don't have the time to do it. So they give you what you want in the contract, let you report some savings, and know that savings is going to disappear rapidly. And to me, this is about it's not just driving P&L impact. That's a big part of it, but it's also improving procurement's reputation in an organization, like winning over operators and P&L owners and stakeholders that want to see that P&L impact happen and want, that maybe there's been a wedge driven between procurement and operations in a lot of cases because of the promises of procurement getting broken, deals not playing out the way they should have been. We're playing a role in helping to fix that and bring procurement and operators back together, behind results that actually hit the P&L and stick.
I want to dive into stakeholders in a minute. I want to. But before I do that, I want to reset the room too, because we're about 30 minutes into this. We're about halfway through this discussion, and I want to make sure. I know we've had some new people come in, both to the room and here. So just a quick recap for us. The areas of expertise associated with what Fine-Tune does. Now, Fine-Tune doesn't actually provide any of these services. Your expertise is in assisting clients actually to create better relationships and contractual engagements on different types of services, right? So what are the 4 or 5 types of services, just so that everybody that's in the room understands this? Because one of the questions is there another category that Fine-Tune is looking to engage in? They've done an outstanding job in expense management for our company as it relates to uniforms. So obviously you've got a fan inside of the room and something that you've done associated with uniforms who wants to know what are the areas they can start to plug you into. So what are the 5? I just want to reset the room for everybody that's come in after your initial discussion.
Yeah, uniforms and industrial laundering and clean room laundering. And that's where when we founded our business back in, we're kind of a dinosaur in this really innovative space in, expense management consulting. We're in our 20th year now. And when we started the business, I left a job with Cintas and we were the uniform experts. And that was the business until 2008-9. We started piloting waste and recycling after our clients kept telling us, hey, that's a similar expense. It drives me crazy, just the way uniforms does. You guys should target waste and recycling. Found the right leadership, built the category offering around them. And that's kind of the model. We don't build our business around middle managers. We find the very creme de la creme, cream of the crop of the industry, and build the category offering around those kinds of category leaders. So uniform rental, which includes clean room uniforms as well, and all the facility service that goes along with it, the towel, million kinds of towels and floor mats and the restroom products and all that other stuff that gets rolled into that industry. Waste and recycling, security and guard services, pest control services, and we are in process of a launch into the sanitation services arena. Have not brought expertise in-house yet, but we're working on a big project already in that space and we're excited about it. It's definitely the next one coming down the pipeline for us. And we're constantly listening to our clients. We have a very adaptable business model. We're really good at, the generalist skills associated with what we do. And for your listeners who may not be familiar with us yet, I think I should clarify that what you get with an affiliation with us is, imagine everything that a category manager would do. Imagine some dream scenario where you had a category manager for waste and recycling who had worked 30 years in the waste and recycling industry. 13 of those, he was a vice president at Waste Management. And all he had to do was manage waste and recycling. Of course, the ridiculous scenario. You're not ever going to have that.
You're not going to have that in a category management team. I mean, not even in the biggest category management teams in the world are you going to have that, right?
No, this person is very well paid. This scenario doesn't exist. However, at the Fine-Tune team led by these people does all the things that you would want that category manager to do, ranging from initial data collection, baseline assessment, setting a strategy for the category, going into the marketplace and executing that strategy, implementing new and better deals, and then managing it on a dedicated, vigilant, continuous basis for the life cycle of those agreements to make sure that your efforts actually hit the P&L. That's, everything in that spectrum Fine-Tune does so that our clients can work on other stuff.
Great. I just got a message online on LinkedIn that says, Mike, I've got to go, but great guest, Rich. Thanks so much. I'll reach out. Feel free to do the same. I may have an opportunity for us to discuss. So awesome. It looks like we're doing the right thing and we're getting this in front of the right people. So thank you for resetting the room like that. I really appreciate it, because I don't think everybody, as we discuss all these things, I don't think everybody understands. Holy cow. I mean, and one of the things I didn't understand either until we really met each other, and probably didn't know this until at least 6 months into our relationship and knowing you, around pest control, right? And I remember having a conversation with you around pest control in your team. And I was like, okay, so like you help people negotiate contracts associated with trapping rats and getting them out of buildings. And you're like, no. We go all the way down to like the biochemical level associated with like molds and food manufacturing lines and things like that, because God forbid, but if your spore count is too high and you're a cereal manufacturer in the Midwest, your cereal line breaks down for a day for cleaning, you just lost, $10 million worth of uptime, right? I mean, that's how far down the rabbit hole you take this stuff, right?
Well, and pest control is a great example of, and I just had to learn this over time. In our early years, I could not afford the best and brightest from our targeted spaces. And so, I had to try to build our business around middle managers because that's all I could afford in the early years. We were not backed by private equity. My partner, Matt Smith, and I still own almost 90% of Fine-Tune. We really clung to our ownership in the early years. We don't have any debt, and so we built it kind of slowly but surely. But finally, around 2010, 11, 12, we were able to attract really senior level, executive level talent from our targeted industries. In pest control is an awesome example. I mean, the guy who leads our pest control offering, a guy named Keith Robinson, is such a needle in the haystack. So for starters, he is one of fewer than 600 board certified entomologists in the United States. And only about 150 of those work in the commercial landscape. Most of them are academics. Okay. So there's like 150 of these, certified entomologists that have the technical stamp that says, I'm essentially a doctor of pests. Okay. And yet he also has 17 years background at Terminix, built his own pest control company and sold it, was a VP of commercial accounts at a large regional player. He's got that intersection of like the absolute mastery of all the technical aspect. And by the way, this is one of the things that ends up scaring procurement out of implementing results in this space. They get scared by their quality people. Okay. Because, Pat, the purchaser, tries to do something in pest control, and all of a sudden quality's like, whoa. I don't know about cost savings in pest control, but keep your hands off this category. I don't want you to change anything. I just need to pass audits. Well, Keith can help you pass audits. he can make sure you'll pass audits better than you have in the past. You will score better on your audits than you ever have before, but he also knows where all the bodies are buried, knows how to extract costs from the program, knows where the waste is. So, it's that level of category leadership that you're getting with the affiliation with us.
Right. I mean, that's the point of, and we've talked about this before, is letting head surgeons perform surgery as opposed to washing floors. You bring people in a buy versus build mentality. You bring people in so that they can actually perform surgery. They're there for an hour, 2 hours, however long they're there for, and then they move on to the next surgery, right? That's the beauty of this model. One of the questions I've got from Lindsay inside of the room is sanitation for what type of industries? Is there specific industries? I mean, do you do sanitation for example, health and assisted living facilities and things like that, or is it just for sanitation associated with office spaces?
No. Across the broad spectrum of target categories, ranging from big food to health and life sciences, to warehousing and on and on. Yes, across the broad spectrum of industries.
Yeah. Are you conducting any business right now with any of the assisted living elderly facilities or anything like that across the United States?
We do work with at least one large group and maybe a second, forgive my ignorance on a second smaller one. But yes, that is, we have a really diversified client base, but we do work with at least one large assisted living network. Yeah.
I mean, that would make sense, right? Because they've got security, they've got sanitation, they've got cleaning, they've got waste removal, they've got everything that you do.
Yeah.
Is in that area as well. So one of the questions somebody had was, and I want to get back to it. I put a pin in it. I'm going to come back to stakeholders. I want to talk a little bit about stakeholders because we might have some folks that are listening right now who aren't necessarily associated with procurement, but are stakeholders in small, mid-sized operations where they're the actual stakeholder who is running the contract negotiation and vendor engagement, right? Not every organization has a procurement department to buy technology. In a lot of cases, the office of the CIO is buying the technology. In a lot of cases, the facilities management team or the chief operating officer is the person who's responsible for a lot of these relationships that you have today. Yeah. So if that's the case, let's talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement. Let's talk a little bit about building the business case on that. And does it change, or is there a way in which you said, like, for example, procurement gets worried and nervous associated with people that are in charge of audit and production services and things like that. How do you help? I mean, I would see you kind of as like almost a marriage counselor between the two, because the folks that you bring in can actually talk the language and have the expertise, as opposed to the procurement organization, which might be a much broader scope of 50 or 100 million in spend in facilities management. And they're doing all sorts of things, including snow removal and grass trimmings and, plantings and arborists and God knows what,
I think, first of all, anytime I get to enter a client, a prospective client discussion via a stakeholder, that's exciting to me, whether it's at the private equity level or, a senior level operator, somebody with P&L interests attached to their incentive plan, because that person's going to care about more than just the contract and the theoretical savings that contract is supposed to produce. They're going to care about what actually happens. We are built around this wild, controversial, crazy idea that the best thing you could ever do with any expense category is to drive it to rock bottom and keep it there. Okay.
Mhm.
Sounds like, but I have been in procurement environments where even that seemingly such obvious statement that I just made is not always viewed as a positive, because it's like, oh, there won't be any low-hanging fruit in 3 years. I like the roller coaster because every 3 to 5 years there's savings for me to get credit for, and then whatever happens from there, that's on operations. Well, we got to get past that. I mean, that's unproductive behavior. We got to get to a place where procurement is implementing real value to P&L, and it lasts and it sticks over time. And there may be certain categories where procurement's always done a really great job of that. But as you get to these more complex multi-year service contract indirect categories like the ones we specialize in, it's not been the norm. We see a lot of, ineffective behavior as it relates to procurement, and operators have noticed. And so, it is an opportunity for procurement to say, I've got a new and better strategy. I've got a plan to solve a persistent problem in our organization. And we've seen time and again within our client operations, the P&L owners appreciate it. They come back and go, okay, give me more of this. I like this. What else can we do? It's what's fueled our growth in recent years and our expansion into new categories.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Just amazing insights there. Thank you so much. I love having this conversation with you because it's one of the areas that I don't know much about. And every time I talk to you, I learn more and more about areas where people can optimize relationships. And in some cases, right, it's not all about saving money. In some cases, it's all about making sure that you get what you need out of a relationship, right? Whether that's stability in the relationship or enhanced services or checks and balances associated with the optimum use. I mean, listen, I say this a lot. There's a lot of ways in which you can optimize your relationship with the electric company, right? And my wife teaches me this lesson here at our house all the time, which is either I can walk around and shut the lights off and just not use the electricity, or I can actually get a light bulb that uses less electricity, right? And this leads to a question that's inside of the inside of the room right now, which says, Matt's from Cintas multiply like rabbits in our location. When I joined, you could barely see the floor in some of our locations. Driver incentives are perverse and cause them to sneak mats and MRO into locations. So how does that work? I mean, is there a situation where you can instead of renegotiating your price per mat, obviously it's usage. It's kind of like shelfware for software, right? I mean, it's the same concept where, hey man, there's got to be people paying for mats that are being swapped out right now in office buildings that aren't being used, I'm assuming.
Without a doubt. I mean, and look, the company reference there is a good company. And by good, I mean healthy, with good strategies. And, I view, there's a lot of people I really like and get along well with at that company, even though we have a fundamentally kind of an inherently adversarial, there's a push and pull and sometimes an adversarial or competitive relationship. But, buyers and sellers are naturally in a state of competition, are naturally in a state of joust. And when, as procurement departments have leaned out and as procurement departments have been asked to manage more with lesser resources, if the suppliers are smart, they are figuring out how to take advantage of that. And so there's their strategy. Now, are you going to respond? Are you going to engage? Are you going to have your own strategy for playing defense, for managing the expenses in question? If you don't, you're losing. Okay. You need to have a strategy in place. And probably that strategy is not going to be hire 10 new Pats and Bobs. Probably that strategy needs to be looking outside your walls for ways to augment your resource. And I got to give you props here, Mike. I mean, the procurement tech innovation map that you put together with Dr. Eloise from Kearney and Fair Market. It is an awesome tool and a visual resource for your community on kind of, I've watched this community emerge over our life cycle. You know, as I said, we're ended our 20th year recently. I have watched these firms pop up, and many of them are younger than us and have emerged in the last decade or so. And, you know, it says to me, like, there are just so many new, innovative, targeted, laser targeted resources out there for procurement professionals to help them manage this increasing workload that they've been presented with, and just get smarter and, you know, get better at engaging in the joust with their supply base. And there's, by the way, I don't view that as anything that, like, there's nothing negative up to me about the joust. It's a natural state. You know, you can get along well and have good relations with your suppliers and still be engaged in that joust.
Yeah. Listen, I think, you know, the relationship between buyer and seller is one that, you know, it does have some adversarial tendencies to it. But at the same time, I'm looking to buy something. I'm not looking to take you to the bone, because if I take you down to the bone, I know you're not making margin, which means my service is going to suffer. And then I'm going to have to go out and find somebody else to replace you at some point in time, because my stakeholder or my organization isn't going to be happy with the level of services that I'm getting, because I worked all of the value of the relationship out of it at the negotiation table, right?
Yeah.
So that leads me back to something you said earlier, which is around supplier transitions, and the fact that you think that based on what's been happening over the last 12 to 18 months, you see a situation starting to arise where you're going to see a lot of supplier transitions taking place in the near future. And I want to talk a little bit about that based on your expertise. When should my community of Procurement Foundry and all of our operating managers and folks like that, when should they be thinking about, how far out should they be thinking about engaging in a process associated with a supply transition? And does that change based on the different categories? I mean, can I move a waste management company in less than 6 months? Can I move a security company in less than a year, right? Like, how far out do I need to engage somebody like you to help me, go through the evaluation, vendor selection, and migration process associated with a move?
You know, is there some variability by industry? Yes. And is there some variability even within the categories based on the specific nature of individual accounts? The answer is also yes. However, as a general, just broad statement, I would just say be a year out. Like, you know, I have seen way too many buyers in the last, 10, 15 years, get stuck because they decided the time to tackle a category was 6 months in advance of contract expiration, or occasionally even 3, or whatever the case may be. And maybe they even had a false sense of security because they thought, well, I've got a month-to-month provision in there, or I've got some, it's not like I just turn into a pumpkin if the contract expires while we're still working on things. Look, there are myriad ways that you can lose your marketplace leverage as you get closer and closer to contract expiration. And your supplier knows how much time you need to get your ducks in a row to make a transition happen. And I have seen firsthand in the last year, especially as it's been harder and harder to win new business in a lot of industries. So losing business becomes totally untenable. And I have seen suppliers, couple instances in the uniform and waste division that I can, or categories that I can think of offhand, where a supplier has literally held a customer hostage once they caught wind or kind of surmised that maybe they were going to lose the account, and where there were only 2 or 3 months left until contract expiration, and they said, we're pulling our service unless you renew with me right now. And that's, the ultimate threat. And in some industries, you can't get by without your uniforms or your waste services for a month even. It'll cost the company millions and operations shut down. And so, you got to be way out in front. And I would just generally speaking say, certainly within indirect services, a year out for sure, because you want that threat of lost business has to be real. And if your supplier knows you don't have enough time to get your ducks in a row, then you have no threat of lost business. you're not really a free agent in the marketplace.
Yeah, that goes back to this whole thought of you just don't have the bench strength internally to be able to handle that, right? Which is why, which is why obviously your business is thriving because, number one, they don't have the expertise in house. I don't think anybody has the level of expertise that companies like yourself have, especially in these niche nuisance areas of the tailspend arena, right? And nor could you afford to do it. I mean, you're talking about, the 6th degree of separation on the categorization of spend hierarchy, and then even within there, the sub services that are being provided on some of these contracts. So it makes a lot of sense to me that both, because the other thing too is not only do the procurement people have to worry about, okay, I think we want to be able to start to bring in some alternatives here and take a look. You have to build the momentum and the buy-in from the stakeholders. If you are in a situation where you've got a procurement organization and you've got stakeholders, and there might be multiple stakeholders across multiple geographies because you're working on a national grid on a contract on a national level and across multiple divisions, you might have the person who's responsible for the operations of the office space, but then you have somebody else who's responsible for the manufacturing facilities and the warehousing facilities. I mean, you've got to gain consensus on all of that before you make that determination and you start to move a security vendor. You know what I mean? Something as simple as a security vendor, right? And then you've got systems integration work with security, with badge in and badge out. I mean, there's a ton of things you have to worry about that.
Yeah, and by the way, so what ends up happening, Mike, in this era of lean procurement is time after time, 38% savings was possible, and Pat, the purchaser, ends up signing a 3-year extension for 11% savings with the incumbent because they were too strapped. They couldn't deal with a project of that magnitude right now, or they weren't far enough out in front, and money was left on the table to take the path of least resistance. It's such a common occurrence these days.
Yeah. So listen, we got about 5 minutes left. I could talk to you about this all day long. I just want to let everybody know I'm doing a last call. If you've got questions, throw them up. If you've got any questions on LinkedIn, please throw them up. I'll take one more or maybe 2 more quick calls, and I mean two more questions if anybody wants to throw them up there. But Rich, just what do you have for advice for folks? I mean, if you've got what can you give folks to take away? What's the one thing, if you could only give them some one piece of advice, what would you give them in your arena?
Well, since I think I'm trying to speak to your community, and I never, the truth is, I don't have one piece of advice. I've got, I don't know, 30 or 40, because you can be really good in one area.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur, by the way.
If you suck in 20 other areas, you're not going to be very good. And so, I mean, but since I'm speaking to a community of, procurement professionals, I think the answer is you've got to figure out how to do the work of 2 to 3 people. And, I don't think that means work 80 to 120 hours a week. That's not sustainable. And yet, that's what you're being asked to do, whether it's been articulated that way to you or not, slowly but surely.
Uh-oh, I think we lost Rich. We might have lost Rich. Well, this could be a first, actually. Let's see if he comes back. All right. Well, we'll give Rich a couple of seconds. I think it's been a really interesting conversation associated. Oh, there he is. Are you back?
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm back. Hey, congratulations. Okay. You made it. All right. So, so you want to finish?
Did you catch my advice? It was find a way to do the work of 2 to 3 people.
Yeah, I caught that. And then you froze up and I was like, okay, so now I'm going to spin some plates.
So sorry about that, but
no, it's okay, man. It's okay.
Which means you got to figure out what resources are out there to help you do that. You don't want to, you're not going to 80 to 120 hours a week. You've got to, and I think the innovation map is a great place to start. People should come and familiarize themselves with all the new and innovative resources that are out there to help them, augment, what they're capable of in-house.
All right, man. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time. Oh, I got one more question for you. When there is a contract due to expire and you want to leverage savings by extending it by a year or two, don't you think jeopardizing a TCO variables, i.e. don't you incur maintenance costs if you have to increase the shelf life of a particular product or service? Wow, that's a lot. Let me try and unwind that. I'm going to try and read that one more time.
Okay, I'm trying to follow.
It's a big question. When there's a contract due to expiration and you want to leverage savings by extending it by a year or two, that makes sense. Don't you think you're jeopardizing the total cost of ownership variables, i.e. don't you incur maintenance costs if you have to increase the shelf life of a particular service or product?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the question is, especially if it's the kind of product or service where normally you might have a certain level of refreshed new product or inventory, and if you're foregoing that, extend the life of whatever is circulating in your account to save money. Yes, there can be some unintended consequences to that. We're mindful of those consequences within our categories, certainly. And there does come a point where there's a diminishing return on for uniforms, for example. Like at some point, you have to have some rules in place for making sure that the inventory isn't 15 years old even in the dirtiest manufacturing accounts. So yeah, I mean, I could go on for a while for that, but I think the question is well founded. Yeah, you're not wrong.
All right. So listen, if you want to, I'm sorry, I'm not sure who asked that question, but if you want to ask that question, you can definitely find Rich and his team on LinkedIn. Go to their website. They've got an active collaboration channel inside of the Procurement Foundry. So if you're Procurement Foundry members and you want to ask Rich and his team more questions, if you want to talk to them about a proof of concept, if you're grappling with a contract right now or a supplier and you think you might have an opportunity, but you're not sure of it, I think Rich has done an exceptional job of showing that he can go with his team pretty far down the rabbit hole on a number of different tailspend and nuisance related areas of expertise. They're certainly changing dynamically on the fly right now based on the current environment and the fact that I think we're going to be getting into a situation right now where if you're a senior leader inside of procurement, I'm already hearing that there's a shortage of staff again, which I told everybody was going to rebound after COVID, and now people are scrambling to try and find help. I don't necessarily believe in build it versus buy it. I think in these levels of expertise, you really need to buy it. And certainly in this case, I don't think you'll find anybody that I'm aware of that is better at positioning your company. That just for pest control alone, the fact that he's got one of 150 people on the planet that can talk the talk, and that is amazing. So, Rich, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the continued support at Procurement Foundry.
Thank you, guys.
Really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next time we talk. And thanks for your help at the conferences, and thanks for your help with the blog posts and everything that you do for us. Certainly, our practitioner community appreciates it. So, thank you very much.
We enjoy doing it. Thank you, Mike.
All right, Rich. Take care. Bye, bye, everybody. Have a great day. Feel free to get in touch with Rich and his team at Fine-Tune, and we'll see you at the next AMA event. One other thing to remember, we're about to launch our new conference, which Rich and his team will be sponsoring, Digital Futures on June 3rd as well. So keep an eye out for that, okay? All right, take care, everybody. Have a great day. Get back to work. Bye-bye.